It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Ray Fittipaldo talking, and without the Steelers making any coaching moves last week going into this weekend, we got to wonder, when are we going to see those moves? We'll talk about that here in the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as a big change the Steelers defense could use in 2025 and our thoughts on how the playoffs played out this weekend. All here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, the Steelers, while we'll get to what happened in the playoffs and the crazy action that was this weekend, the Steelers, not much news happening on the South side. So there was some people expected maybe a few days after Mike Tomlin's press conference to close the season, there would be some coaching moves. And Mike Tomlin did note in that press conference that he did expect some coaching moves. And he said, naturally, with some contracts, ending, there's going to be things, but nothing has been announced as of Monday morning. We're recording this early 9 a.m. On Monday. Now, something could get announced after this. That often in the world of podcasting and reporting, sometimes the inconvenient timing for announcements can be the case. But Ray, is this a case of the Steelers might not be actually making moves, or is this kind of more so just what happens? Oftentimes, these teams are make these moves without telling anybody, and the announcements just come when they come.
Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin is very deliberate and methodical. And I think, sometimes these coaching contracts, they'll run through the end of February run through the end of January and sometimes even into February. And Mike Tomlin might have already told these coaches, hey, listen, you're not coming back. Go out and find yourself another job. And then, eventually that's how the media learns about it when he's hired somewhere else, or, eventually it gets out that, the Steelers aren't bringing somebody back. So, yeah, Mike Tomlin alluded to it at his postseason news conference last week. Changes will be coming, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to happen this week or even next week, Chris. Sometimes these things trickle out slowly.
I think that's where the Steelers fans, I think, are frustrated. People want to see change happening while they're watching other teams in the playoffs after the Steelers lose in the first round for the fifth time they've made the playoffs in a row. But I think that's where there's patience that's needed, even though the patience is, people give, I'm tired of patience. But it's not necessarily patience for watching change. It's patience for realizing this is just part of the process. The Steelers could very well know who's moving on and who's not. They're just not saying it right now. Like you said, there could be, giving guys time to find other jobs. There's also could be the fact that they're waiting for other shoes to drop. The Steelers aren't changing their head coach, which means other coaches who are looking for head coaching jobs, they're filling in those voids. And that might oftentimes, it's like in free agency, when you go back to free agency and like everyone's waiting for when there's 20 wide receivers out there, but they're waiting for the first number one wide receiver, the one that everyone's looking at, the best one to sign the big contract. And then once that guy signs, everyone else starts signing. And I think that might be what the Steelers are going through right now, is they're not pursuing a head coach. So there's a lot of assistant coaches and coordinators that are looking at, hey, could this be my chance to get in here? I'm going to interview as many times as I get. But once those other head coaching vacancies get filled, then all of a sudden everyone's trying to build their coaching staffs. And that's when the Steelers will need to be finding their guys. But that being said, Ray, looking at what this team needs to add, could it also be a matter of not just replacing coaches, but maybe adding coaches, into the staff as well? The Steelers known for spending, among the least on their coaching staffs in the league.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Both of the coordinators are under contract. Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, is under contract. So I think we can assume at this point, unless there's a surprise there, and Mike Tomlin changes course and he does decide to make a change at coordinator, any coaching change at this point, Chris, are Steeler fans going to feel satisfied if Aaron Curry doesn't come back as a linebackers coach, or Eddie Faulkner doesn't come back as the running backs coach? I mean, not to belittle what they do, but I don't view any of that stuff, position changes, as critical changes. Within a way an organization does its business. I'll go back to a couple of years ago. They Mike Tomlin brought on Brian Flores as a senior defensive assistant, and it kind of came out of the blue. I remember it was a Saturday morning, wasn't expecting it. It was February 19th, just 1 week before the combine. So a lot of these times, in a lot of these instances, it takes time for these things to unfold. The NFL has slowed down the head coaching hiring cycle. So, it could be, 2-3 weeks from now, one of these big name coaches out there, like a Robert Saleh or somebody else, doesn't land a job. Maybe that's Mike Tomlin's time to pounce, get one of those high profile guys, bring him on as like an associate head coach. And, maybe that guy can be the difference maker that they're looking for.
Yeah, and maybe they can be, because I think clearly the Steelers need the ingestion of new ideas. They need to find answers there, and I think that's where the Rooneys as an ownership group and this front office, if they're looking at trying to build this team, it's not just talent that they need to replace. It's also different strategies. It's also finding different answers. They also need to develop some positions faster or at all. Offensive line. For all the things the Steelers didn't do this year, the offensive line not developing might have been the biggest hurt piece of all of them. When you go back to the quarterback play, sure, Russell Wilson didn't play well down the stretch, but he played well for 2 months, and eventually this team was supposed to develop a run game, and it didn't. Yeah. And you saw in those last 5 losses where the run game was mostly non-existent in a lot of those big moments, and not being able to win the short yards, when that was supposed to be the calling card of this Arthur Smith offense, was being able to run the ball, being able to push people off the ball. And yes, you had a young offensive line, 2 rookies starting most of the season in Frazier and McCormick, Broderick Jones in his second year and younger than both of them. But Isaac Seumalo, was his injury lingering all year? Maybe, we don't know. Dan Moore Jr. looked like he was good in the first 2 months. It was terrible in the final 2 months. And ultimately the group never coalesced to become a better unit. And which is, again, disappointing, considering they did that the year before, where they found their feet mid-season, played stronger towards the end. And now they're looking at basically right back where they kind of started the year before, with young players, but not sure who's gonna lead and who's gonna be the best team. I think that's where the Steelers need coaching help to try to better develop some of these players and units.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for the Steelers, the offensive line peaked in October or November, and like many other position groups on that team, that was the case. And if you watch other teams in these playoffs, and I know we're going to discuss the playoffs later on in the show, Commanders playing great late in the season. They're peaking at the right time. Look at the Bills. Bills absorbed a couple of losses in the season, didn't get the 1 seed, but they're playing really good football now too. So, the Steelers have to, figure some things out. Injuries did play a big part, in the offensive line underperforming. I'll flip it over to the defense for things that they can maybe look at in the offseason, Chris. I don't know about you, but watching these games this weekend, these defenses are set. They're not running around pointing, like the Steelers are. It was like a fire drill, like with the Steelers. They weren't lined up properly. They were late getting to things. And I watch these other teams. Yeah, you're subbing, but, they're very stable. They're not changing a lot. And I think that's something that the offseason can maybe, bring some resolution for the Steelers. It doesn't mean there has to be a major coaching change, but sometimes these things are just hashed out over a long offseason. Hey, that wasn't working for us. Maybe we got to do this. Maybe we got to be simpler on defense. Those are the types of conversations that are had, in the winter or the spring after things go wrong for you.
Yeah, I think that's part of the equation there. And I think there's a specific aspect of the defense that needed to be better with how they play. And I think it's playing to a strength that they were supposed to have this season, which I think they do have. They just didn't use it enough. And I think that we saw something in a playoff game that talked about that. We'll get to that next year on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. At first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in a car accident or any accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, one thing that happened, we'll get to the overall how the playoffs played out in the next segment. But when the Bills beat the Ravens, I saw a stat that said that at least in the first half, they blitzed to Lamar Jackson on 46.9% of his dropbacks, almost 50%. And they said there were only 3 times in the year where they even blitzed teams a third of the time in games. So clearly that was an adjustment that the Bills made specifically to play Lamar Jackson. That's very much what the Steelers had typically done to Lamar Jackson over the past, 6 years of facing him since he became the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. And I feel like that's not what they did against Lamar Jackson in the last 2 games. They kind of backed off. They tried to do things to, to do different things in the defense. And then when I looked up the blitz numbers, I noticed this was the least often or the lowest rate that the Steelers blitzed in a game in the past in a season in the past 6 years. The Steelers blitzed 25.9% of the time. There's only one other time in the last 6 years that they blitzed less than 30% of the time, and that was 2021. That was when they blitzed 27% of the time. But you go back to their past years, the 2 years before this, they blitzed 34%, 31%. You go back to the years in 2020 and 2019, the last time they were a top 5 defense, they blitzed over 40% in 2020, basically 37% in 2019. Those are the highest rates they've had during that span. And it makes me wonder if that's part of what needs to change with Teryl Austin. If it's not necessarily Teryl Austin himself changing, if it's getting someone who's going to help him up front devise more complex schemes as far as how the Steelers get after the quarterback without exposing easy options in coverage, because I think that's very much what has won them a lot of their games against Lamar Jackson, even when Teryl Austin has been the coordinator.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't have this breakdown, but what's the percentage of Steelers defensive backs blitzing this past season? That used to be a staple, when Mike Hilton was with the Steelers, and they got a similar player this year in Beanie Bishop, but you really didn't see them go to that, a lot this season. I think, anytime you hear the word blitz, I think there's a certain amount of risk that comes with that, because if you don't get home, then there's going to be, in all likelihood, man-to-man on the back end, and, the potential for some big plays. Not to mention, Chris, that if you're playing a guy like Lamar Jackson, then if he does escape the pressure, then there's all kinds of open room for him to run as well. So maybe that was part, of the Steelers' thought process there and how they wanted to defend him. You talk about the Bills. I mean, this is interesting. I don't know how does the weather play into that, right? Is Lamar Jackson's footing, is he less likely to break a 60-yard run than maybe he would in some other games? I don't know. All that stuff plays into it, but I agree with you. I think blitzing certainly could help this defense when you're not getting home. And let's face it, the Steelers were not getting home late in the season. How many times did we sit back and say, well, there's no pressure? There's no pressure. The Ravens' first touchdown in that playoff loss, 3rd and 13, they bring 4. Absolutely no pressure. Lamar Jackson has all the time in the world to hit Rashad Bateman. When it's not getting home for you, I think that's when you need to change up. And I don't think the Steelers adjusted and did a good enough job of that here this season.
To answer your question about looking up some of the rates, in 2020, the last time the Steelers had a top 5 defense, and when they blitzed at over 40% of the time, Mike Hilton was sent on pass rushes on 70 plays throughout the season. there was no defensive back. The closest defensive back to that this season was Deshaun Elliott at 28 times. So right there's a big difference. Heck, Patrick Queen, who is a good pass rushing linebacker, he blitzed only 79 times this year. So only 9 times more this year than Mike Hilton did 5 years ago. So or 4 years ago, I guess. But again, looking at that, I do think that kind of tells like, hey, the Steelers may need, I think the Steelers did some interesting things in coverage that, and again, this defense wasn't bad this year. They finished ranked 8th in points allowed, 12th in yards allowed. That's a good defense in general, but they need this defense to be elite while they're still a team without a franchise quarterback right now. And I think that's where they weren't elite in there. And you can go back to 2019, 2020, they were an elite defense. When you're top 5 and you're carrying the team the way that those defenses did, that's what they need to happen. And so maybe that's where the answer is. And you brought up Brian Flores. I feel like that's part of what Brian Flores did very well for the Steelers in helping Teryl Austin back when he joined the team, was he helped devise some more of those upfront looks. And you look at what he's done in Minnesota, they've become a more aggressive defense. And it's something that I think the Steelers could use on both sides of the ball, playing to their strengths, being the team that's attacking, saying, hey, you know what? You might be better than us, but you're going to have to take you're going to have to take and deal with the best part of our team. And for the Steelers right now, that's getting after the quarterback, and they have to find different ways to engineer that so that they can be the team that teams have to say, you know what, maybe we have to adjust our game plan to what the Steelers do because they're going to be bringing heat all game. Yeah.
Remember the days? I mean, it wasn't all that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, how, the Steelers with Dick LeBeau would confuse quarterbacks. They would have zone blitzes and, different players would drop into coverage. And, that's how they would get a lot of their turnovers because quarterbacks couldn't process that in time. Now, listen, offensive coordinators have caught up. The zone blitz isn't as big a part of the game as it was, a decade and a half or 2 decades ago. But, I still see teams running the zone blitz and, it's fairly effective for them. And, I know we're on, the blitz topic right now, but Chris, when I watch these playoff games, who won? I know there was a breakdown in the Rams protection, but who won that game for the Eagles on Sunday?
Saquon Barkley.
Well, no, defensively, Jalen Carter.
Oh, I did that defensive. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I was just thinking about those long touchdown runs, right?
Barkley's touchdowns don't matter at all if the Rams convert that touchdown and they kick the PAT. The Rams win that game. Jalen Carter brought pressure twice on that. I think the final 4 snaps, he got the pressure. And that interior pass rush, we talk about it every single week on the podcast. I don't care. I'm going to hammer it home for the next 3 months. The Steelers have really good outside pass rushers.
They need interior.
Other than Cam Heyward, they don't have good interior pass rushers. And if you don't have that push up the middle, your outside guys can't do their job effectively. And to me, that's the number one thing that has to change over the offseason. Look at the Rams, what they did to invest in their defensive line last year. I think their first 2 picks, right? Fisk and Verse. I know Verse is versatile. He can play outside. That guy's a really big and fast dude. He can play anywhere on the defensive line. They went out and got guys on the D line that can impact games. And even though they lost yesterday, I thought the Rams defensive front balled out. So to me, everyone's talking about quarterback. Of course the Steelers got to find a quarterback, but you want to get back to playing Steelers football, you got to get tough up front, and they're not tough enough right now.
I agree, and I think that's what we've said. We've said a lot this season. Both of us have been talking about, hey, like I know everyone wants a shiny wide receiver in the first round, but getting a killer in the middle of the defensive line next to Cam Heyward again, I think that's the priority right now. And there's some good defensive linemen in this draft. There's Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I think everyone's going to look at the other guy in Michigan that's going to probably go in the top 10. I don't think that's the guy the Steelers can afford to get right now with all the different they have. But if Kenneth Grant falls to you in the middle of the first round, that might be the move if you're the Steelers, is to try to get a guy like him who is a go-getter, has a high motor, can get after the quarterback. And there's other guys, Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, he'll be playing in the national championship tonight. I think that there's guys that they need to add there. But to your point, they need to be physical. And part of being aggressive up front is trusting that you can be physical. And those Steelers for many years were the team that, with Cam Heyward and Stephon Tuitt, those guys opened up so much in the defense because the two of them together could not just be part of the stunts and the twists and attacking different gaps. They would physically, when they did that, they wouldn't open up holes in the defense. And I think that's where to your point, the blitz, you can blitz all you want, but if you don't have the detailed work in your defense to cover up behind the blitz, to take away what quarterbacks are immediately going to try to go to when you blitz from certain spots, all you're going to do is you're going to open up easy passing lanes, and quarterbacks will just be like, there's that hole. And sometimes you still might, like Jaden Daniels in his, when we'll talk his game, the Lions sent heat after him, but Jaden Daniels just didn't blink. And I think that's part of what's really impressive about him in doing that. But how many times, Ray, did you cover the Steelers when they played Tom Brady and the Patriots, and even with the best defenses, where they would blitz from the left side, the right side, it didn't matter. Tom Brady always knew where it was coming from, got the ball out quick, and would strike right behind it. So it's not a perfect plan, but to your point about getting back to playing tough Steelers defense, I think that's a necessary part of the plan to get there.
Yeah, and listen, we're going to have draft talk extensively over the next couple of months. One more name to keep an eye on. You rattled off a few among the interior defensive linemen. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, really good player, athletic freak. Not sure if he'll be there at 21, but he's another name to keep an eye on.
Certainly, like you said, we will be having lots of draft coverage here over the next several months with the Steelers. But before we get to that, we have a lot of talking about what this team's doing internally, free agency moves, who are they going to re-sign. We'll keep you up to date with all of that here. But we also want to talk about what did happen in the playoffs. We talked about the Commanders and the Bills here in those wins. But let's talk about what happened in this next weekend. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are Mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can go get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township, PA, or visit their website at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
It's that time of year again to get the Honda of your dreams during Happy Honda Days, where you'll find great offers on a sporty new Civic, spirited Accord, fun to drive HRV, and versatile CRV. So don't wait. Turn your holiday dreams into reality with a new Honda named KBB.com's best value brand. Buy online, reserve from select dealers, or visit your local Honda dealer today.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, we've talked about the Steelers. Let's talk about what happened this weekend in the playoffs, because sometimes you can learn from what other teams are doing that they're winning at this stage of the season, but the Steelers haven't been in the divisional round of the playoffs since 2017. But you looked at the four games this weekend. The Chiefs beat the Texans 23-14. The Commanders, biggest upset of the weekend, in my opinion, 45-31 over the Lions. Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback. I think is he the first rookie quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger to make a conference championship game?
Yeah, he might be. Ben was in 2004. Now we're in 24. 2 decades since that last happened. We'll see if he can get it done. Take that next step. No rookie quarterback, I believe, has ever made it to a Super Bowl. So if he does that on the road at Philly, then that's going to be a great story.
Another Pittsburgh tie. I think the only one ever was Dan Marino, right?
Well, Dan made it he made it in
it was the second year. Okay.
Second year. Yep.
It was the second year. I mixed that up. But there you go right there. It's still either never having or been a very long time. But the Commanders will be up against the Eagles, who beat the Rams 28-22 in a close one there. And then, of course, the game that everyone was watching in Pittsburgh, 27-25, Bills over Ravens. I want to start there, though. The Ravens came into this game, and playoff Lamar Jackson had been a narrative for the past several years. And look, Lamar Jackson made his fair share of mistakes in this game. He threw an interception that was just terrible in the first half. He fumbled. DeMar Hamlin, former Pitt guy, forced a big fumble early in the game. But man, it looked like the Ravens were about to take control of the game again in the fourth quarter. You got Mark Andrews fumbling in Bills territory. And then when Lamar Jackson does engineer that 88-yard touchdown drive with less than 2 minutes to play, and they get to the end zone, they need a 2-point conversion. It seemed like deja vu, where they called up a play action pass where Lamar Jackson is just trying to find Mark Andrews in the flat. He's wide open. He gives him a catchable ball. This one a little bit more catchable than the one he did against the Steelers back in 2021, but still an incomplete pass targeting Mark Andrews. in the on a 2-point conversion. A little bit of deja vu for the Ravens, and you got to feel for, I know Steelers fans are rejoicing, and I and you absolutely should. Their rivals, Patrick Queen was even saying, "Hey, Roquan, I saved the jet for you." But this has to be a heartbreaker for the Ravens in that this felt like their year, Ray. Like I thought this was the year that they were going to finally break the mold. They were finally they had Derrick Henry. Lamar's been playing lights out, 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and then here they are, finding every which way to lose in the playoffs in this one.
Yeah, I thought Lamar played great in the second half. I mean, then leading them down the field and then that opportunity to tie the game late. Mark, you could ask Mark Andrews. He'll say 100 times out of 100 he should catch that 2-point conversion. I thought it was a little bit behind him, Chris, a little bit low. I thought maybe Lamar could have put it on him up higher. But, other than that, the second half was great for Lamar. But when it comes down to it, mistakes in the first half killed the Ravens, right? The fumble by Lamar, the bad interception by Lamar. The story of the Bills season is their turnover margin. They have the best turnover margin in the NFL. Josh Allen doesn't turn the ball over. We'll see if he can keep it going. But what was the tally yesterday? 3 for the Ravens, none for the Bills.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what brings it home in the playoffs. So just fewer mistakes by Josh Allen. If you look at the numbers, I think Josh Allen only had 120, 130 some yards passing. It wasn't like a typical Josh Allen game. To me, the Commanders and the Bills, and we're going to talk about the Commanders in a little bit here. I looked this up this morning. I might write about this later in the week. The Bills, situational football, 4th down conversions, their first 2 playoff games, 6 for 9. Okay. Commanders, 4th down conversions. They've been doing it all season, 6 for 9 in their 2 playoff games. To me, when you can get those when you can extend drives, especially in the red zone, get you closer to the red zone, those are killers for defenses. And when you got guys like Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen who can, make 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 consistently, it's a game changer. And to me, that was a big factor in these playoffs. Mobile quarterbacks, right? We asked Mike Tomlin about it last week. Who's still alive? Jared Goff is out. Matthew Stafford is out. Maybe not Matthew Stafford's fault. They had a chance to win that game. I thought he was the better quarterback over Jalen Hurts yesterday. But
certainly,
mobile quarterbacks make all the difference in the world, and just hammers home the point that Mike Tomlin was making last week. Steelers have to go out and find their guy. So we'll see if they're able to do that over the next couple of years.
I think this was kind of extra frustration for Steelers fans. Whereas there's some Steelers fans out there that are cheering the Ravens losing. The Bills very much beat the Ravens with kind of a Steelers blueprint, not asking their quarterback to throw the ball a whole ton. And granted, they were in a snow globe. You look at that, how that game played. That was old school AFC football, but it was defense. It was winning the line of scrimmage. It was an offensive line that was bullying the Ravens at times and creating space for James Cook and creating space for Johnson and Davis and Allen all to run the football. And then again, like you said, Josh Allen not even throwing for 130 yards in this game like that. If you had told me that Josh Allen had less than 130 yards passing, I would have told you that the Bills lost this game. But if you had told the Bills had won with turnovers, like the Steelers, whenever they beat the Ravens, that's how they beat the Ravens. They forced turnovers. I would have said, okay, now I understand why they won this game. And it's one of the things people say, well, you can't win based on yourself on turnovers. Well, the Bills certainly did that this weekend.
Yeah, the Bills are they're kind of like the Eagles a couple of years ago, 4th and 1, even 4th and 2. Josh put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. I think he's going to get it more often than he doesn't. So it's a great little thing for that offense to have in its back pocket. And Jaden Daniels the same way too. I mean, their 4th down percentage over the course of the entire season is off the charts. We'll see if they can keep it going. Maybe, we'll see if the Eagles maybe have an answer for that in Philadelphia this week. But situational football rolled this weekend, and the teams that did it well moved on. The teams that didn't find themselves at home.
Certainly. Let's talk about some of these other games. We focused on those a lot. You brought up Washington. Man, again, I'm just very impressed by Jaden Daniels, 22 of 31 for 299 passing yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, also ran 16 times for 51 yards. And that it was the balanced look here of this, because Brian Robinson averaged 5.1 yards per carry on 15 runs. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. This Commanders offense looked unstoppable against the Lions. And granted, the Lions are a banged up defense. They haven't had Aiden Hutchinson. They had injuries in the secondary. Like they had rough times there. But in this game, to your point, the even though the Commanders were 4 of 12 on third downs, that's not a good look. To your point, they were 3 of 4 on fourth down. So on at least 3 of those 8 misses on third downs, they turned those into continuing the drive because they were able to win there. And I think the Commanders, this is a very unique situation with Jaden Daniels. I thought Jaden Daniels was good coming out of college. I didn't think he was this good this early. And who knows? This might be a one-time thing. RG3 was awesome for Washington way back when in his first year, and then he fell off. But I don't think this is that. I think Jaden Daniels is doing some really smart things with the football, and you're seeing something really special right now in Washington.
Yeah, and listen, the people in Pittsburgh are fretting over, the Steelers receiver room. After Terry McLaurin, Chris, who among the Commanders' playmakers is like a big name that really scares you?
Yeah, right there. Austin Eckler, the running back.
But the point is they got guys making plays. Like, they got that Zacchaeus who was terrible against the Steelers, but it stuck with him. He's hung in there. He's making plays. They got that number
Diaby
2.
Brown.
Diaby Brown. He's making plays in the playoffs. None of these guys are big names. So I know people, you can't trade George Pickens. There's no one's going to be left. Listen, you can go out and sign a free agent, and you can build through the draft, get some young guys in here who can make plays for your offense. Do you need a franchise quarterback to really make it work? Yeah, but there's a lot of teams out there in the NFL that could survive with average receivers room if you just have guys who step up and make plays the way the Commanders have here late in the season.
And of course, the Eagles found a way to beat the Rams, the Chiefs doing what they always do and just find a way to just win when they get to the playoffs. Their 7th straight AFC Championship appearance. That's just insane. One thing I saw that was interesting, Ray, and I want your thoughts on this. On the weekend, every single team that lost led the game in total yardage.
Yeah.
Every single team that won, I think, won the turnover battle. Or at least tied.
Yeah.
Like the Chiefs didn't. Neither the Chiefs or the Texans turned the ball over, but the Chiefs didn't. The winning teams did not lose the turnover battle. And I look at that and I think, man, like that's, like you said, situational football. Yes, you might lose the overall yardage battle. You might get pushed back a little bit, but as long as that you're winning the third downs, the fourth downs, and being there and winning in the red zone, that's another key part of this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe you do, but what was Houston's red zone percentage? They went up and down the field against the Chiefs, but they couldn't really make plays when they got inside the 20 or the 30. They had to settle field goals a lot. So, you hit the nail on the head.
1 of 3.
1 of 3. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm betting Kansas City was probably better. Maybe not a whole heck of a lot better, but
2 of 5.
Yeah, so a little bit, just one more red zone touchdown. That's in that type of a game. That's all you need. So, it's just making plays at the right time. That's what postseason football is all about. And if you can do that, you're going to survive in advance. And it looked good at times for teams like the Texans and the Rams. They were in those games, but if you can't get it done in the fourth quarter, you're going to go home. And those teams just didn't get it done in the end. I mean, I look at that Rams game, Chris. Not being able to sort out protection. I know they had a rookie center in there. A lot of people are blaming Kevin Dotson. I don't know who the blame's on, but twice in the last 4 snaps, they just let a free runner come. They let an interior lineman like Jalen Carter just have a free run at the quarterback. You're not going to win football games doing that. So you could play great for 58 minutes, but if you don't play great when you have to, it's not going to matter.
And to your point, when you have a guy like Jalen Carter, it makes the offensive line freak out so much because they're like, okay, we got to get this, we got to get that, but we also got to get this guy. And oftentimes, when you're the one forcing miscommunications, that's when your best players can sometimes become untouched because they're worried about too many different things. They're discombobulated, and then all of a sudden, you're like, wait, why did we not block the main guy on the defense? That's why I think
Carter, he's the one you got to block.
Yeah, absolutely. But how many times have we seen TJ Watt get a free look at times because offensive lines were too worried about what's going to happen here versus there, and then all of a sudden TJ Watt's in the backfield, and you're like, crap, that's not what we wanted to do. I think that's what the Steelers have to get back to, both schematically and personnel-wise, in finding another guy up front. Next week, you'll see the Bills travel to face the Chiefs in Kansas City. You'll also see the Commanders travel to face the Eagles in Philadelphia. It's going to be exciting stuff here, but here in Pittsburgh, we'll be getting you ready for what's going on here. Will Art Rooney talk this week? Will the Steelers make any coaching moves announced this week? We'll keep that covered here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, thanks for joining us here, and thank you all for joining us here on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as all of the shows that are from our writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back Wednesday with more here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.